Which resort has the better launch coaster? And which resort has the better log flume? Let's find out today. This is Knott's Berry Farm versus Disneyland. Let's kick it off with the ride comparisons, starting with the launch coasters. Accelerator at Knott's Berry Farm versus Incredicoaster at Disney's California Adventure. Right off the bat, I do have to say, both of these coasters are really quite fun. Both of these rides are built by Intamin Amusement Rides, a Swiss roller coaster manufacturer. Accelerator has a powerful launch. It launches you to 82 miles an hour in just 2.3 seconds. But there isn't too much after that launch besides a top hat and some overbank turns. Incredicoaster does not focus on the launch. It's a very long ride that has some airtime moments, great onboard audio along with that launch. Incredicoaster tells a story, while Accelerator is simply there for the thrills. Because of Incredicoaster's immersive ride experience, a lot of people would probably prefer Incredicoaster. However, personally, as a roller coaster fan, I'm going to give the win to Accelerator here, because that launch is my favorite roller coaster element I've experienced so far. On Accelerator's launch, it feels like you're hit in your back by a truck. Of course, I say this in a good way, because as I said, the launch is my favorite element I have ever experienced. Accelerator is a very short ride, but it does so much with it, I slightly prefer over Incredicoaster. Though I do admittedly love Incredicoaster nonetheless. I just think Accelerator is a little stronger in the elements department, so I like it a tiny bit better. Next, we have our final coaster comparison, the Wild Mouse coasters. And right off the bat, I'm going to give this one to Goofy Sky School. And there's a couple reasons for this. Firstly, I really enjoy Goofy Sky School. It's a fun Wild Mouse coaster with a fun drop, good laterals, and it has some nice light theming. The problem is, Coast Rider is awful. And the reason for this is because, one, it goes through the course very slow. But secondly, it has shin guards, which get very painful as the ride goes on. I usually try to stay pretty positive, but Coast Rider's a ride I struggle to stay positive with. Goofy Sky School is actually a really fun ride, so California Adventure in the Disneyland Resort ties the score. Next up, let's compare the interactive shooting dark rides. Knott's Berry Tales Return to the Fair from Knott's Berry Farm, and Toy Story Midway Mania from Disney's California Adventure. And I gotta say, this was a tough decision. These rides are so close in quality. Starting with Berry Tales, I really enjoyed this ride. I love the original story of it, and it's a very cute ride. When you ride Berry Tales, it just feels so like Knott's Berry Farm. The excitement for this ride is almost unbearable. I'm sorry, that was terrible. It also has the inclusion of light physical sets here and there, so overall, Knott's Berry Tales really helps Knott's Berry Farm's ride lineup in my opinion. Toy Story Midway Mania is pretty fun too. On a side note, it spins really fast, so if you might get sick from spinning and stuff like that, I wouldn't recommend this ride. But anywho, this ride is very creative, and I really do enjoy it, even if I haven't ridden it that many times. However, if I have to make a decision between this and Knott's Berry Tales, I'm gonna go with Berry Tales. There's just something about Berry Tales where every time I ride it, I come off with a smile on my face, which definitely tells you that it's a fun ride experience. Even if you're terrible at hitting the targets like I usually am, you can still have a fun time on Knott's Berry Tales. It's a very enjoyable ride, even if you don't do well shooting. In the battle of the interactive shooting dark rides, Knott's Berry Farm takes home the win. Next up, let's talk about the drop towers. Supreme Scream at Knott's Berry Farm versus Guardians of the Galaxy at California Adventure. While these are both drop towers, they are extremely different. Supreme Scream is more of a traditional drop tower built by S&S. It gives a great view and a fun drop. But Guardians of the Galaxy, it's much more focused on the story. It's an immersive ride that always makes me laugh. Plus, this has some of the best airtime you will ever get, even better than a lot of roller coasters out there. The floater airtime you'll experience on Guardians of the Galaxy makes it one of the most fun rides I've ever been on, and for that reason, I think it's better than Supreme Scream. But the immersion, the pre-show, the airtime, it's a well-rounded drop tower experience, and it's one of the best out there. Some people call this the best drop tower in the entire world, and I definitely can see why. I think it definitely has a case for being that. Continuing on, let's discuss trains. Both resorts have good train rides. The Disneyland Railroad can represent Disneyland, but Knott's can answer with their own train. These are both great sightseeing attractions, the Disneyland Railroad also acting as a transportation ride. While the one at Knott's does not offer any transportation, it does give good views nonetheless. It's cool to get different vantage points than you normally would from the footpaths or even other rides. What I love about the Knott's train is how employees are actors, and they are trying to rob you for money and stuff. The interactions are pretty funny, and it makes it feel a little more authentic. It's one of the things that, again, like I said with Fairy Tales, just makes it feel like Knott's. Not many other parks would do something like this. With all that being said though, I do slightly prefer the Disneyland Railroad. This classic ride is still great to this day, and I think one of the reasons why it's a little better is because it actually acts as a transportation ride, as I said. Plus, the views are equally as good, if not better. Plus, you get some unique scenes on the Disneyland Railroad where you can't get anywhere else. And that's another reason that this ride is worth going on at least once. I would recommend taking a full tour around the park, so you get all of the scenes and all of the views. Moving on to the first of two water ride comparisons, let's start with the Rapids rides, and I'll make this section brief since I haven't ridden either of these. Right off the bat, I'm going to say that Calico River Rapids wins for me. While Grizzly River Run has its positives, I just don't think it quite stacks up to Calico River Rapids. And the reason why is Calico River Rapids uses animatronic. Grizzly River Run, while I'm sure being very refreshing on a hot day, doesn't have those animatronics, so ultimately, I think Knott's Berry Farm deserves the win. Next up, we have the Fight of the Log Flumes. This was one of the main reasons I wanted to do this video. Splash Mountain represents for Disneyland, but Knott's Berry Farm answers quite strong with Timber Mountain Log Ride. Starting off with these two rides, I gotta say, the log flumes at these two resorts are amazing. They both have some similar strengths, great rock work, good animatronics, a fun story. They are both just great rides. Oh, and they both have very catchy musical scores as well, especially Splash Mountain, which is one of my favorite musical scores for any ride ever. Splash Mountain's final drop is better than Timber Mountain Log Rides, which is definitely a strength. Splash Mountain's final plunge is one of my favorite drops out there. It's quite tall and feels pretty steep too. There is one minor thing I want to mention, but it actually is a big implication, and that's how fast you move through the water. On Splash Mountain, you move pretty slow, and Disney gives you plenty of time to take in your surroundings. I wish Timber Mountain Log Ride moved at the same speed as Splash Mountain, because Timber definitely moves quicker, and sometimes it definitely feels like it moves too fast, as you don't really have enough time to take in all of the scenes. If anything though, I guess this just makes you ride it more. Oh, darn. The speed of the water is one of the reasons why Timber Mountain Log Ride is so much shorter, which brings me to the biggest difference between these two log flumes, the length. Splash Mountain is pretty much twice as long, and you can definitely tell the difference in ride time. This, the better drop, and the better story with the better animatronics in most cases, gives me the fact that Splash Mountain is a little bit better. But this is not by as wide of a margin as most log flumes versus Splash Mountain would be. Splash Mountain is one of the best rides at the entire Disneyland Resort, and it's probably one of the best rides in the world. So the fact that Timber Mountain Log Ride comes as close as it does to Splash Mountain's quality says a lot about Timber. I think Timber Mountain Log Ride is probably the second best log flume out there, unless I'm missing one of course, besides Splash Mountain. Especially if you're looking for a fun, well-rounded, story-focused experience. This concludes it for the ride comparisons, but there were 3 lands I could think of that we could compare, so let's do the land comparisons too. Let's start with the Old West sections, Frontierland versus Ghost Town. Both of these themed areas do their job quite well. And while Thunder Mountain is a lot of fun, I think Ghost Town personally is a little bit better. This is another very close call, but Ghost Rider is better than anything Disneyland's Frontierland has. Not only that, but Ghost Town at Knott's feels a little more authentic to me because of the blacksmiths and the buildings, and I just think it looks a little better, but again, this is just my opinion. Ghost Town at Knott's also has a lot more rides. It has multiple roller coasters, multiple water rides, and Calico Mine Ride. All this is to say, while I do enjoy being in Frontierland, I enjoy being in Ghost Town even better. The heart and soul of Knott's Berry Farm is amazing. Transitioning to the boardwalk sections, we have the boardwalk for Knott's and the Pixar Pier for California Adventure. Like the last entry, both of these lands do their jobs very well. But as comparison goes, I have to pick one, and I've picked Pixar Pier. The main reason for this is how picturesque it is. This is definitely more picturesque than the boardwalk at Knott's Berry Farm, not to mention the Incredicoaster's there too, and that ride, as I said before, is very fun. It's close, but DCA does a little bit better, just a little bit better in this department. Now, I want to note that I would also compare to kids areas, but because of how much Toontown will be changing in the near future, I don't think I can do that just yet. With that being said though, I think Toontown would still win. So if you've been following along at home, the Disneyland Resort finished with 5 victories and Knott's finished with 4. So the Disneyland Resort triumphs in this exercise. Keep in mind, a lot of these comparisons could go one way or the other, and this is just my opinion. But I highly recommend, if you can, to check out all these different places, the rides, the lands, and of course, the parks themselves.